President Lyndon B. Johnson at Southwest Texas State University in May of 1962, which I think is around the same time that the CIA document was surfacing. He states that if you can control the weather, you can control the world.
We have special guest with us. Ariana Victor is an investigative filmmaker known for her work on public health and environmental issues, including co-producing The Great Awakening in the Plandemic series. Her latest documentary, Just Look Up, which she independently produced, investigates the topic of geoengineering and its impact on human health, ecosystems, and the atmosphere. The film premieres this Saturday, March 28th. Well, that's not this Saturday. That's next Saturday, right? Yes, next Saturday at the Directors Guild Theater Complex in Hollywood, California. Please welcome to the show, Ariana Victor. Hey, Ariana.
Hey, Jimmy. It's so good to be here with you today. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, let me just go ahead and play the trailer for this new film that's premiering on March 28th, and we'll talk about it in a sec. Let's go.
They say the devil's in the details, right? The stratospheric aerosol transport and nucleation, Satan.
That's actually what they call it.
Right. That's the acronym, Satan.
That's written in MIT.
They aren't even hiding it anymore.
They have denied things over the years. Oh, we don't have that science or that thing. And then 5 years later or 3 years later, dang, they're putting it in a press release that they really do have it.
The White House released a congressionally mandated report, and they're focusing on reducing or eliminating natural sunlight from reaching the Earth.
Geoengineering carries with it a tremendous range of uncertainties, ethical and political concerns, and the potential for catastrophic environmental side effects.
Reporting on this, like you guys are doing, it puts you in the crosshairs.
If you speak out about anything that is against the narrative,
you're in line to get your head cut off the guillotine.
Scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. This is nuts.
There's different nanoparticles everywhere, not only in the food, but in the water. It hides in the tissues. It builds up inside the nervous system.
This is a conspiracy theory. It's not something that sort of normal, rational people think is happening.
It's not a theory. Would you care to look at my data?
There has been testimony in front of the United Nations. There's also been testimony in front of the U.S. Congress. And I'm talking 15 and 20 years ago.
They know where it's coming from. I mean, he's a biologist. This stuff, it does not belong free form in the atmosphere. It's nano material. That's man-made.
Whatever's up there is going to come down on us. Right? It's going to land in our water, going to land in our food. If we're going to say our food is organic, what about our sky?
Did the colonizer ask for permission to take our land? What makes anybody think that geoengineering is going to be a different story? This time, they are colonizing the sky.
So that is the trailer for the new movie Just Look Up by Ariana Victor. Now, Ariana, tell me, who is poisoning the sky and what for, and why doesn't anybody do anything about it?
Well, I'm going to start here, Jimmy. So, I think that we need to understand that there is so much intentional misinformation and natural confusion when it comes to the topic of geoengineering. And I believe that that is half of the battle here, is simply trying to decipher through the decades of noise, mistruth, and scientific suppression that has occurred over really the last 30 decades of those who have been trying to point to the sky, tell citizens, we got to look up, wake up, and take action. There's something clearly happening here. And, there's many layers. It's such a complex topic. You have the traditional cloud seeding companies, you have weather modification companies, you have governments, there's private sectors, there's public sectors. And I think that's the importance of raising awareness on a topic like this now, is because we need to really come together and have a clear understanding of who and what is doing this for what purpose, because otherwise it's going to stay convoluted and continue to happen above our heads with no real action occurring.
And so do we know who's doing this?
There are many layers. So on one hand, like I said, we do have traditional weather modification, which is the cloud seeding, and that alone has, which we spell out in the film, a lot of the aluminum that's coming down in the rain. We have barium, strontium, these are the three elements. So we have the traditional cloud seeding companies, and there's private sectors. We also know that solar radiation management and SAI, stratospheric aerosol injection, which I believe differs from cloud seeding. Solar radiation management is the plans to chemically block the sun as a means of fighting climate change and stopping the heating of our planet. So that's when you'll see the difference these days. That's when sometimes you'll notice the lines in the skies go out. They'll create those grid mark patterns, and by 4 o'clock, the sky is completely white and we can no longer see sunset. So those are the programs that no one is admitting to actually doing. They continue to tell us that these are just theoretical. I have the White House document right here. It's the congressionally mandated research plan to start researching some of these solar radiation management technologies, but they say we've never implemented them. They're all theoretical. They're all in research. We must study them as a means of fighting climate change. So I don't have the most solid, I wish I had a more solid answer for you, but I know that there's so many different people. And I do believe that a lot of it is military, which is partly why it's under wraps. The citizens don't know.
What is the evidence that, is there evidence that this is happening, like scientific?
The most scientific evidence that we can find is the rain samples, because the rain samples clearly show, especially after these heavy spray days where you see the lines in the sky, you'll have significantly higher amounts of aluminum, barium, and strontium. And aluminum has been talked about again and again in weather modification patents, solar radiation modification patents. Harvard, kind of the mainstream, I guess, project that a lot of people know about is SCOPE-X. SCOPE-X is the stratospheric controlled perturbation experiment. This was being run by a geoengineer out of Harvard University, funded by Bill Gates as one of the investors. And this program has since been shut down. But again, to this day, they'll tell us that no experiments have ever taken place. Every field test that has been attempted to go into operation has been shut down, either by indigenous activists or activist groups in general, which is awesome to hear about. But yet they point to these programs and tell us, look, it's not actually happening. And I believe in some ways it's almost the distraction mechanism where we're looking over here and looking at what the media is telling us. Well, there's some other entity that is spraying above our heads. And so the best evidence that we have is we can look at we really have to look at it from such a holistic viewpoint where we see, okay, this is what the Harvard project is saying we use. We can look at these scientific documents and see that aluminum is going to be most effective, yet the media tells us it's only sulfur. And then we can test the rain after we see these heavy spray days. They test the rain with just normal clouds. We don't get aluminum. You test the rain after heavy spray days. There's significant amounts of aluminum. So people all over our country have been doing this for decades. And at this point, for me, that's the most solid evidence. And it's in our soil, it's in our trees, it's in us.
And so everybody knows the dangers of heavy metals like aluminum, right? They cause all kinds of disruptions in the endocrine system and your immunity, and it also can cross the blood-brain barrier. It could cause Alzheimer's and dementia. There's so many bad things that can come from. What about barium and strontium? What does that do?
That's a great question. I actually don't have the specifics of what that does to the body. I know that barium, interestingly enough, they'll use it when you're getting an X-ray. So they'll actually inject you with barium in order to make whatever they're looking at. Let's say it's a brain scan. They'll put barium into the bloodstream so that the brain scans are more visible when you're looking at it through these X-ray electromagnetic technologies. And so that's something that I just found very interesting about barium, because I believe that's probably one of the reasons that they're spraying it into the sky, is because if we're operating these weather modification experiments, all of it, it's not just chemicals. There's electromagnetic component as well, and we're doing so using it with satellites and frequencies. And in order to study what we're doing, I think they use the barium on one hand to be able to have more visibility on the atmospheric level. But of course, it's going to be causing disruption in the body just as much because they're toxins.
So RT tweeted this out. U.S. confirmed to poison the sky with toxins. Newly declassified files reveal that the United States used toxins to influence Vietnam's weather. Conspiracy theorists now allege that the CIA could be doing this, mixing toxins into jet fuel to control the population and make people sick. Well, here it is from mainstream news right there. CIA accused of poisoning the sky with toxins as files expose secret weather control agenda. And that's from thedailymail.com by Chris Malari. Once top secret CIA files have detailed America's plans to control the world by manipulating the weather. The documents, declassified in 2003, discuss the controversial topic of weather modification, the tactic of launching rockets or using planes to dump chemicals into the atmosphere that alter the climate and local storm systems. Although the resurfaced documents from 1965 did not mention the specific chemicals used in the experiments, they did discuss the need for more funding of the weather modification projects that would soon be used as a weapon of war. In fact, the memos noted that federal funding for the secret program was set to be 4 times higher in 1967, the same year the U.S. began spraying toxins over Vietnam to cause floods and landslides. And here's the document right here. It says weather modification is the subject. And in the first paragraph, it says, for your information, some attachments are provided which show the extent of interest and trends in weather modification research in the United States. For example, federal support for 1967 will be 4 times that for 1963 and over twice as large as that of 1965. The copy of the letter from President Johnson to the Secretary of Commerce shows that an expanding program has White House backing. So it seems like this definitely has been researched as a weapon of war. And I'm pretty sure that there was a treaty in the mid-70s that would outlaw this. And what? And MOD. What is MOD?
NMOD.
The Environmental Modification Treaty.
Oh, she knows exactly what it is. So you know about that treaty. So of course,
I do.
You don't have a treaty for something that doesn't exist. So obviously they had this technology back in the mid-70s. They were funding it heavily by these these new documents show in the 60s. So the government's obviously into this, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, what a better weapon to use than one that the people have no idea is being used against them. There's no one to blame but the forces of nature or even God. And it can allow significant damage to be done. And I think, that yes, I think, if we want to go back to, President Lyndon B. Johnson at Southwest Texas State University in May of 1962, which I think is around the same time that the CIA document was surfacing, he states that if you can control the weather, you can control the world. I mean, Henry Kissinger said, if you can control the food, you control the people. Again, so you take it one step further. Well, how do we control the world? We control the weather, because now, what a magnificent force of nature that you now can will your power over. And who knows what happens from there? Interestingly enough, President Lyndon B. Johnson mentions in that speech that the ability to control the world's cloud layer would allow for this control of the world's weather. And so, again, when we come back to these lines in the sky that are being sprayed out and creating these artificial clouds, that's exactly what they are. They're artificial clouds. And I think so many of us, we don't make the connection. I mean, clouds are so innocent. There's something that we look up and we have pastimes as children, for those of us who were lucky enough to have real clouds, of staring in the sky and just, we would make shapes and stories. And with these clouds, they're seen so innocent. So we don't think about them. And we don't think about that so much control can occur depending on what's going into our atmosphere. I actually have a document here. It's a 1996 Air Force document, and it's called, let me think, I don't have the cover right here, but it was about how to control the weather, owning the weather, and using weather as a force multiplier, once again, in times of war. So you can either degrade enemy forces or you can enhance the territory for our allies. We can give them more rain if we like what they're doing. We can take away the rain. There's so many things that you can do to essentially force your will over a country without having to bomb them, but still causing equal damage in just a very different way. And so in this document here, they talk about artificial weather. This is page 27. They say that this is just a research document. So they add some disclaimer, which adds them some liability and protection from this actually being real technology. But they talk about really, really interesting things here and all the different ways that they can use weather as a tool of war. One thing that I found very, very interesting was that nanotechnology, this is what they quote, nanotechnology offers possibilities for creating simulated weather. So we're entering a time where it says a cloud or several clouds of microscopic computer particles all communicating with each other with a larger control system could provide tremendous capability. So one major advantage of using the simulated weather to achieve a desired effect is that, unlike other approaches, it makes what otherwise the result of deliberate actions appear to be the consequences of natural weather phenomenons. So again, they talk about these nanotechnologies and how the production of these nanoparticles could be the same price as a pound of potatoes. So this is incredibly lucrative and kind of insane. I mean, you talk about nanotechnology and it sounds so far out there, but the idea of like iCloud, I'm like, oh my God, is this is that legitimate? Do we have microscopic computer particles floating above us in our heads or floating above our heads? And what is that doing when the nanotechnology of the nanoparticles of aluminum and all these other heavy metals are raining down on us?
So I get why they would want to control the weather for military purposes. Mm-hmm. What do they get out of doing that over Los Angeles, Atlanta, Portland? What do they get out of doing that to us at home? Is it now Professor Yang we had on the show last week, and he talked about how there's an elite cabal of people who want to cull the herd population, and they want to actually shrink our population. Is it something like that?
I really believe so much of this is rooted in a depopulation agenda. Absolutely. The story that I began to see coming into this, and as a Californian, I grew up a mega environmentalist. I would never, ever in a million years think that I'd be holding the perspective that I have today. I was a big-time climate change activist. I come from a very environmental family. My father was a soil scientist, and his mission was to save the world through carbon sequestration, getting the carbon out of the air, and regenerative organic farming. So again, this is my background and world I come from, and I was very passionate about this, saving the world. And I thought, fighting climate change is how we're going to do this. And so I went as far, and so many of my peers and friends that I know in California, I had the belief that, I was not supposed to have children or bring children onto this planet because of climate change. We're facing overpopulation, alleged overpopulation, I will say, and a world that is destroying itself, and humans are destroying the world. So the climate change story goes. So you now can see that the climate change story is incredibly anti-human. And so if we believe that CO2, human-produced emissions, is the only thing that's causing the extreme catastrophic weather events that we're now witnessing, the extreme heating, all the things that geoengineering is likely one of the major root factors that it's causing this environmental destruction, if we now can just blame, they have us so entranced with this CO2 narrative and believing that we are the cause of this destruction that we're seeing on Earth. And so, yes, I do believe that that's anti-human and ultimately a depopulation agenda. I will take it one step further because you asked, why would this be happening over Los Angeles? Why would they be spraying Los Angeles? It's not like they're trying to dry out the crops and disrupt agriculture. Why would they be doing this to a large city? And I have this book right here. So The Geoengineered Transhumanism is a book by researcher Alana Freeland, and she goes deep. This is the third book in her series. One of her first two books were about the spraying of the sky, and with every book, inevitably, her research got deeper and deeper, and so the rabbit hole goes. So in this book here, it talks about not only terraforming the Earth, but also how this geoengineering is directly linked to a desire to transform the human body as well. And so think about it, like this sounds so far out there, and then you really get the full scope of what's happening and it starts to make more sense. So bioengineering and biotechnology has kind of touched all frontiers at this point. So we've done it with our seeds, with the GMO crops. We've done it with animals. We have pigs and salmon that are genetically modified to grow faster for food production. We are now doing it with trees that can suck up more carbon dioxide. So the next frontier would be the human body. And so this comes in many forms. We look at the mRNA vaccine that's modifying our messenger RNA. So that's directly modifying our DNA. But with the nanotechnology involved, so Alana and many others believe that the chemicals being sprayed from geoengineering systems, this nanotechnology mixed with the electromagnetic technologies, which come in the form of the ionospheric heaters. We have the NexRad weather systems. They're kind of those big balls that people, like the big white orbs that people might see. And then the 5G towers that have recently rolled out in 2020. So this is all kind of being integrated as kind of this global control grid that ultimately enables what Alana Freeland would call a transhuman future, where humans merge with artificial intelligence and synthetic biology. And so, again, to most normal people hearing this for the first time, it's going to sound like a crazy conspiracy theory, but really this falls under the concept of something that is very well documented and out in mainstream media, and that's the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And so that is the brainchild of Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum. And the Fourth Industrial Revolution signifies a time in which we will witness a blurring of boundaries between digital technology and natural biology. That's how they define it themselves. And so what is geoengineering if not exactly that? We can't tell if our weather is being created by technology and modified or entirely natural. And so, again, you have all these systems playing at once. There's so many layers. Some people do believe that the modification of the human being is next. And so connecting the human to this grid, specifically the 6G grid that rolls out, it's the connectivity that's necessary. So when you have aluminum in the body, aluminum is highly conductive. It makes us more conductive. There was some studies that came out with, have you heard of the podcast recently, the telepathy tapes?
Yes.
Okay. So this was really fascinating for me as someone who had been researching aluminum and geoengineering. Such cool stuff, by the way, that these investigators and this documentary filmmaker got into. But the concept was that the nonverbal autistic children, there was something that the mothers were starting to witness and experience, and that these children were having telepathic abilities where even though they were nonverbal, they had the ability to connect with other nonverbal telepathic children and communicate from some place that they actually referred to as the hill, that they would go to telepathically. And there was all these things that you just couldn't make up. They knew the names of Johnny from Minnesota and his mom, and Bobby from California could have never known that. And so the mother started connecting and all these stories started getting shared. And that's really what created this body of research that is so fascinating. But I took it back and started thinking about, okay, this is so cool and beautiful. And what a beautiful reframe of the gift of autism. But what we also know about autism is that autism has proliferated in recent times. I think 1 in 22 children in California are now being diagnosed with autism. I think it's about 1 in 32 in our whole country. I want to say it was, correct me if I'm wrong if you know the stats, I want to say just 100 years ago, or it was 150,000. I don't have my stats correct, but it skyrocketed. It was exponential growth kind of out of nowhere. And we know there's several factors for that, one being the vaccines, but I think another is the aluminum from the geoengineering. Because Chris Exley, he's a professor out of the UK, Dr. Chris Exley, he's a aluminum researcher, and he discovered that he actually was able to get a hold of some kids who had passed away. They were autistic. So post-mortem, he took a look at their brains and cut them open and saw there was high levels of aluminum in the brain of these autistic children. And we know the same to be true with Alzheimer's. So I'm making it all full circle. In the very beginning of the telepathy tapes, a story was told about Lucy O'Bell, the I Love Lucy actress. And she had apparently gone to the dentist and was driving in her car one day and started to hear radio signals and could hear the music playing in her head. She got freaked out, called her dentist and said, "What is happening?" And they said, "Oh, that's because we put metal in your mouth. Your mouth is now acting as a receiver to these frequencies. So that's probably why you're picking up the radio stations and the music in your head and you can hear it through your mouth." I heard that. I thought about the telepathy that was now occurring with these autistic kids who likely have high amounts of aluminum in the body. And is that a reason that they're now able to be connected on this telepathic frequency grid that we don't otherwise have an explanation for? Does it have anything to do with the high amounts of aluminum that's in their body? I don't know, but it's just a very interesting curiosity that came into my brain as I was researching all of this.
Well, it turns out Lucille Ball actually uncovered a Japanese broadcasting station that was underground here in Los Angeles. That was during the war. That's actually what she did tune into. It wasn't a commercial radio station. It was actually the enemy. But anyway, listen.
Wow, I didn't know that.
I'm pretty sure that's what I'm pretty sure. But listen. We have to move on. We have another guest, Ariana Victor. Everybody, check out her new film. Just Look Up. It'll be out on March 28th, and it'll be premiering at the Directors Guild Theater Complex in Hollywood, California. Ariana, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for your info and your work.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. Thank you for your work as well.
Okay. Hey, we'll be in San Antonio, Albuquerque, Houston, Dallas, Salt Lake City, Las Vegas, Burbank, California. That's on May 7th. That's a Saturday. Then we'll be in Tulsa and Oklahoma City, Spokane, Tacoma. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets. See you there.